What happens if you do literally thousands of hours of meditation? And what happens if you do thousands of hours of meditation living with a Buddhist nun for 2 years? Well, actually, after all of this, I no longer try and quiet the mind. In fact, I rarely meditate in the traditional form that I used to. And we're going to go really into the nuance in this video because there's a lot to cover. And we're going to go through the whole journey of how I started to how I got into shadow work, to how I thought about meditation and how I think about the unified self now instead of just quietening the mind. But how did this all begin? Well, for me, I was in a tough spot. I really wasn't enjoying my experience of life. And so I went super deep into meditation, right? I did 10-day silent retreats. I would meditate 1-2 hours every day. And eventually, I got the opportunity to actually live with a Buddhist nun, right? A 73-year-old senior Buddhist nun. She was amazing and has been such a deep influence on my life, someone that I truly adore, appreciate. She's no longer with us, and yet she's absolutely in my heart. And I learned so much. My life got drastically better. I was able to literally live, right? Not just sit, but live in these meditative states, right? We would sit for 1-2 hours a day, but then she would say, Cameron, bring it with you. Make this a 24/7 practice, right? Not a 1-2 hour meditation practice, but a 24/7 practice. We were working with all different states, karuna, mudita, but the main one was metta, which is loving kindness. And so I would sit in metta, loving kindness all day, every single day. And that was my experience of being alive. And it was such a drastic difference to how I'd been living before. I couldn't think of anything being better. And my mind was extremely quiet because of all the meditation, right? My mind was very, very peaceful, relaxed, and full of love. It was a beautiful place to be. But I did start noticing cracks. And I started realizing that there was something to the integral path, to including everything. And just going in one direction of meditation, which is what we call the waking up path, is beautiful, but it wasn't sufficient. And so I started to really get curious about what would it be like if I didn't have to meditate and I would just arrive naturally in a beautiful state experience. Right? If I would just arrive naturally in myself. Because what I was noticing is that if I was in constant meditation, right, I would do my sits, I would feel amazing, right? I'd be able to maintain it 24/7. But if I stopped doing it, my state experience started to get worse and worse and worse. And I would find that my experience of loving kindness, which is a beautiful one, would sometimes find it hard to integrate in regular life. Like doing work, like building the business, having relationships at times. Because it would always answer the question with more loving kindness, which, listen, that's not a bad answer at all. But I really started to think there was something more to this. And that's where I met a mentor of mine, his name's Kim Barter, who really created this process called ESR, Evolution of Shadow Resolution, which is a shadow work meta model for how we can not only do our shadow work, right, where we clean up our distortions in the mind, but we use that to find the underlying treasure in our subconscious and bring that up. So we have all the state experiences that we might do from a normal meditation, but it's integrated through our psychology instead of bypassing and escaping it, okay? And so Kim was such a deep influence on this journey. And I've now worked with him for a good few years now, and it's really changed how I view all of this work as a whole, and we're going to get into that. And so I started doing this shadow work, but I'm going to be real honest, like absolutely honest. It was not smooth sailing to begin with, because when I realized this, I realized I couldn't just keep meditating, right? I couldn't just keep doing loving kindness because there was something deeper that I needed to get in touch with. And so my experience, we can see, actually got worse to begin with. So I was letting everything come up. I wasn't avoiding it. And it was pretty scary. It genuinely was. I was letting all my shadows, all the distortions in my mind come up. That feeling of not being enough, that feeling of not being worthy, arising and taking a look at it when before I just loving kindness, metta, feeling good, feeling good. But now I was looking at it and it was scary, but it was liberating. And it took some time, it really did, because not only did I have to invite and allow it to be there and get used to that, I had to get familiar with the model, because the model was very, very specific, right? It was very, very in detail about how we work with specific shadows. So it's not just a blanket, give it love, but sometimes if it's an introjected feeling, right? An idea that I'm not good enough, I give that back. But if it's a split ego, a part of myself, then I'm going to integrate it. And if it's a projection, I'm going to integrate that too, right? I'm going to allow the projection to be reowned so I can deal with the material that's actually my own. So I had to get really, depth with all of the different forms of shadow and how to actually do this. But then it did start to work. And I really started to be able to work through the different shadows in my mind. And at first it felt like a bit of an uphill battle. And it was. But as more light entered the system naturally, I would wake up in better moods. I would approach shadow work with more ease. I would be more relaxed on a day-to-day basis. I would have less problems. And life just got easier, better, more enjoyable, more alive. Until I kind of reached this tipping point where the experience now, when I wake up, no meditation, nothing, was better than when I was doing loving kindness 24/7. The experience was so vivid, so beautiful, so alive, yet dynamic. It wasn't just one flavor of loving kindness, which is a wonderful thing, but it was the dynamic flavor of existence. Feeling a deep sense of peace and serenity, but at the same time an aliveness and a passion and love, all at the same time, or just moving when it wants to rise and when it wants to pass away. And so I started to get to this sense of a unified self, a self that was no longer fracturing, going in 10 different directions, but everybody in the internal community was on board. And I wasn't carrying so much stuff from the past. Instead, I felt liberated. I felt light. It felt easy in a lot of ways. And an aliveness returned, but also even a quiet mind. Not because I was trying to quiet the mind. In fact, I was doing the opposite. I was constantly inviting parts to arise if they wanted to say something. I'd be constantly curious if there was an introject, some kind of belief I'd taken on, so that I could actually give it back. I was no longer suppressing the mind, and because of that, it became naturally peaceful, harmonious, and quiet. And as I got to that tipping point, it just started being like a snowball going downhill. Because I was now going through the shadow work from such a beautiful place, not trying to fix myself, but just always curious, what other treasures might I discover today about myself and about the experience of being human? What might I find that might give me a new, richer flavor of life over the next few months and years? It became an adventure and an exploration instead of something where I'm trying to fix, trying to slog through the mud. And absolutely, there are times where a trigger might be really overwhelming and it might be difficult. But that moved from being 50% of my experience to being maybe 1 or 2%. So that 98% of my life gets to just be lived from this beautiful place where we're exploring, we're enjoying life, and it's really a rich experience to wake up in. Addictions dropped away, and the way my goals, my desires became much more aligned with who I actually was. And so I got everything that I wanted. I got the quiet mind. I got the beautiful state, yet it was through integration, through harmony with my psychology, not going against it, not erasing it, but actually integrating it And when everyone's together, we can just go up together, right? We can go up into spirit together.